guys, welcome to our conversation.
Good
Today,
morning.
it's Read Across America Week.
Woo!
Yay.
So every week, Read Across America Week.
It should be.
Truth. But, you know, the NEA has designated March 2nd as Read Across America Day, and the first week of March, we celebrate Read Across America. And the theme this year is Celebrate a Nation of Diverse Readers. So let's talk books. What's
yeah,
I can see some of your choices. Mine are hidden.
Way to keep your cards close.
I know.
We were supposed to come with books? No. I'm so ill prepared. I'm just like, let's just talk about how great reading is. And that is Read Across America. I mean, traditionally, Read Across America Day is a time when people do read alouds, which we've discussed this before. We're all fans of the picture book or the everybody book, and still wholeheartedly believe it doesn't matter what age you are. A good book is a good book. And so I've been trying to convince some folks in my school that we should do some read alouds for our advisory classes. And we're going to do a set early in the month about healthy relationships, and a set later in the month about women's history. So I'll probably be talking mainly about those, but what's everybody else got on their plate for today?
Well, Joanne, I would be very curious to know how you are doing that in your advisory classes. So are you going to use Sora? How are you doing that?
We're giving options to teachers and students on how they want to do it. So we're using some Sora materials, but I've also found videos of sometimes it's the author, sometimes it's a guest reader reading the books, so if students want to watch something. So for healthy relationships, I gave them a choice of 3, and they can either read it or watch the video of someone reading it, and each of the 3 are a little bit different.
What's one of them?
One of them is Voices in the Park, and so the whole scene with that is different. It's anthropomorphized apes who are taking their dogs for a walk in the park, but each little section of the story is told from a different point of view, and how their attitudes affect their communication and their relationship with each other. Like a very snooty mom thinks this rude boy ran up to her son, but her son is so happy to have a friend, and it's all about your perception. So that was one. Oh my gosh. I just was writing this lesson last night. One of them is, because you all know I love Jacqueline Woodson. She wrote a book called The Day You Begin. Mm-hmm. And it's about how life in Zoom is exciting. It's about how a girl is watching her classmates speak, and and different things that make them different, and maybe the classmates laugh about or don't quite understand, whether it's the way they look or their accent or what they have in their lunch. And so that's more from a personal perspective. Like if you want to cultivate healthy relationships, but you're kind of reticent because you're different, how can you go about that comfortably? And then the third one, oh my gosh, the third one is Nerdy Birdy Tweets. So Nerdy Birdy,
that book, but you're so excited about it.
I am. I'm super excited about it because the first Nerdy Birdy was adorable, and then there's the sequel, Nerdy Birdy Tweets, and Nerdy Birdy's best friend is Vulture, and Nerdy Birdy gets obsessed with this social media thing called Twitter. and his relationship with Vulture kind of falls apart because of it. And there's, I mean, again, this is why I love picture books. There's a lot of sly adult humor in there about, like, you know, Nerdy Birdie's really excited because a flamingo's following him now, and you know, he just gets all excited about things like followers and playing angry worms with someone online and stuff like that. So, you know, all of them deal with relationships in different aspects. So that's how I was incorporating that into an advisory lesson on healthy relationships. Wow, I talked a lot. Somebody else go.
Well, thank you, Joanne, for explaining that. That sounds really cool.
That does sound really cool. Miss Gunn, what books do you have for us today?
Well, I was thinking about, so like diverse readers to me means lots of different things, right? It can mean like different types of characters that you connect to for different reasons. It can be different formats of books. A lot of my reading in the last few weeks has been related to a book committee that I'm involved in, which I sort of like. You know, as a grown-up, one of the nice things is that you get to choose what you read all the time for the most part, right? But when you're on committees or different things, sometimes you get told what to read, and I weirdly sort of like that, because then I find things that maybe I wouldn't have picked up on my own. One of the things that I read recently, I'm going to try and see if you can see it, is a graphic novel called Kiss Number 8, which we have in our library, but I hadn't read before. And I mean, graphic novels are really a hit with lots of different students, right? And they come in all sorts of topics and forms and whatnot. This one is a realistic fiction, and it is a girl who, like, when we first meet, the story opens, she is like naming her kisses. So who she kissed first, who she kissed second, etc. And when we get to kisses 7 and 8, like there's some pretty major life upheaval. And there's some things about her family that come out that she wasn't aware of. Her sort of thinking about her own sexuality and what that means for her and what the repercussions that are for her at school. She goes to a private Catholic school. So there's some folks there who maybe aren't as open to what she's going through as others. But one of the things that I actually really liked best about it, like I enjoyed the story quite a bit. I liked the art a lot. I thought the characters were really, some of the drawings just made me laugh out loud, because the way the artist draws them was just so lifelike. Like I could picture a kid like making that gesture or that face. But at the very end, there's a kind of question and answer interview between the writer and the illustrator. And it was really interesting to me to think about one of the characters we discover is trans in this book. And the author started writing the story in 2004. And although that's not that long ago, things were really different back then. And there were very few books that had trans characters in it. Which now, from a 2021 perspective, I'm like, oh, that's not that big a deal. Like, there's all sorts of books. And it made me stop and think, like, what has changed in the last, 17 years, what hasn't changed in the last 17 years. But I thought there was a lot of things to think about and digest from a graphic novel that sometimes people are less like, oh, they don't count, and I think they absolutely do count. And this is a great example of one that has a lot going on, both from an enjoyment standpoint and from a makes you think about the world standpoint.
That's awesome.
A lot going on. And that sounds great. And it sounds like it would be a good companion for You Should See Me in a Crown, which there has been so much hype about this around this book. So I was like, when I read it, I was a little like, how can it possibly live up to the hype? And then I was, it's so good. It's like the romantic comedy, but high school prom queen drama, LGBT story with the character is like super low key about her sexuality. Like it doesn't come out until about a third of the way through the book, but it's not that it's not an important part of her. It's just the main character is so focused on just like surviving sickle cell anemia and taking care of her family and going to college. Like she's got all these other foci that sexuality is not her main drive. And then she just like, there's a meet cute, she stumbles upon a cute girl, and it's just really wonderful. Anyway, You Should See Me in a Crown. It was just so great.
That's great. And I love, again, what you're saying about, that's not the focus, her sexuality, because that's how things get normalized, and that's so important. There's a TV show that I know we all have watched. I won't say the name because it's a little inappropriate, but you know what, Creek. And I have students who've told me they've watched it, so I know you all know what we're talking about. One of the most beautiful things about that show, without giving too much away, is there's a romance and it's treated like a romance. It's not like, oh, look at this. This is unusual. We don't see this on TV. It's just, here are people falling in love, and it's awesome. And I love books that do that too.
I love that show.
I know, it's so great. Oh,
David.
Love it. So my book that I chose to talk about is very different than what you guys have just talked about. And We Are Not From Here by Jenny Torres Sanchez. And in thinking about Read Across America, this is the story of 3 characters who really want to get to the United States. And have you guys read it?
No,
but I
okay.
have it.
There was a lot of talk about it last year in the spring, and I finally got to it recently. And it's of course inspired by current events of people from Central America trying to get to the US, this epic journey, and all of the danger that they come across as they're trying to get to the US. So it follows 3 characters, and they all want to get to the US for different reasons. And there's all these people that help them along the way, which is really interesting to see their plight in helping these people. Why are they? Because they're putting themselves in danger as well, but why do they need to? And why do they feel this calling to help these people? And I mean, I think we've all heard these stories of what people go through to get to the United States, but to read it in that day-to-day journey is really makes your heart beat faster to see what they're going through. There's this train that they have to get on several different times called La Bestia. And just the fact of when they have to jump on this train, and then they have to jump off while it's still moving in certain points along their journey, and then of course crossing the desert. And it's really remarkable. And it shows the strength of the characters, and not just physically, but just mentally what they have to endure. And all to get to the US, and then it's not going to get any easier.
Right.
So it really made me think about and look at the people who do come here, and the reasons why they want to come to the US, and how we don't always make it easy for them once they've taken that journey. So I highly recommend it. Like I said, it is really just makes your heart beat faster. You're on that journey with them, and rooting for them to make it.
Oh my gosh, Miss McSheehy, a refugee story always does that to me. That's why I like read them very far apart, because I need like recovery time. Like Miss Mescher, I know you've read this one too, like The Night Diary. I mean, it's not about a refugee coming to the United States, but fleeing I can't think of the name. Which is it?
It's fleeing conflict, right?
Yeah,
like
she's fleeing conflict. She's in India when India and Pakistan are dividing, and she's on the wrong side of the divide. Actually, her family is religiously mixed, Hindu and Muslim. So finding any side of the divide is tough for her, but just her journey is so like and even with like Alan Grant's or Gantz,
Yeah.
refugee Gratz. I knew I was putting wrong letters in there. If refugee is 3 different refugee stories at 3 different times with very different consequences, but it's always about that harrowing journey. And I think we forget sometimes because we're so far removed from any immigration stories in our lives, and other people are too, but then there are people going through it right now, that it's just full of like difficulties and turmoil and legalities and prejudice, and it's just like they always get me so like worked up.
Right. Well, and just from a more of a middle grade perspective, the book Ernesto Divided by is it by Cisneros? No, can't remember the author's last name, but he's a kid on the border and he goes to school and his mom has been deported while he's gone, and so he has to try to figure
Efren, right?
Efren, yes, by Ernesto.
Efren. I'm like, wait a minute.
Whoa, but
please.
I mean, he goes to school and his mom is deported and his dad is trying to figure out how to get her back and can they afford a coyote, or can they afford to bring like a legal crossing? Like, what can they do? And trying to parent across the border. There's just so many hardships. And so, yes, Efren Divided is another good refugee story. Anybody else have other books?
The other one, I mean, we could talk about books for days, right? The other one I was thinking about is another one that I've read recently called The Downstairs Girl, which is historical fiction, but like a time period and a perspective that I like was new to me in a sense. So it's during the Reconstruction era, so post Civil War, I think time period is like late 1890s. And it's set in Atlanta, and the main character is the daughter of Chinese immigrants to America. And I didn't realize, apparently historically, there was a number of Chinese immigrants were, I don't know, forcibly, but like very heavily encouraged to move to the South to take over essentially from slaves that had like after the Civil War to like fill that workforce. But also were not treated particularly well. This girl, she doesn't really know who her birth parents are, but she's been raised by this older Chinese man who works for a really wealthy family in town. But where they live is like in this secret underground basement that was used during the Underground Railroad. And they've been living in this space for years and years. And the people who live above them and like run this print shop don't know that they live there. But because it was part of the Underground Railroad, there's these different access points so they can kind of get in and out without anybody realizing. And a lot of her education came from listening to the people upstairs. And so she sort of feels like she knows them, even though they haven't actually met. But it's her story of like trying to be self-sufficient and have a career and like what she learns about her past. But, we think a lot about racism with African Americans and Black people in the United States. And there are certainly other groups of folks who face that. And this was a really interesting historical point of view of racism against Chinese Americans and like post the Chinese Exclusion Act, what that meant for them and what their choices were. And she's just also a really spunky, like strong girl character who, despite like these really challenges, like tries to like do really great things for herself. And luckily does meet some people along the way who are willing to be supportive and helpful. And the relationship between her and the person who raised her is really lovely. So it was really great story, but also like taught me something about American history that I didn't know.
I love it. I love historical fiction. And that reminds me of Prairie Lotus by Linda Sue Park. So also set in the Reconstruction era, but like in like Wisconsin. So same time period, similar racism, but different location in the United States. And the main character is half Chinese. And and so faces like this extra layer of discrimination. Like her dad wants to hide her to protect her, but also like it stifles her, and she's trying to figure out and like dealing with all the sexism and the fetishization of Chinese women.
Mhm.
And but it's it's good.
Well, Ms. Mescher, when we were talking about swoon-worthy books, Stacey Lee's, one of Stacey Lee's other titles, I know now you're talking about Prairie Lotus, but I have to go back a moment and talk about Under a Painted Sky.
Yeah.
Oh yes.
Because
Westward Expansion.
yes, it's like the gold rush.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Mhm.
and I too learned, Ms. Gunn, I learned about, like the Chinese American experience during that time period. And then of course had to go look up more because I was like, I didn't even know. And it was so fascinating. And also a very like sort of sassy, plucky, strong female character who has a strong friendship with a runaway slave. And then they dress up as boys so they're less discriminated against. And just, I love everything about that book. Sorry.
Yeah.
And there's a little romance. That's why it ended up, we were talking about it during Swoon-worthy, but anyway.
And there is a little romance in this one too.
Of course. I mean, what's life without a little romance? Okay. I'm going to change subject from historical fiction to fantasy.
Yes, please talk about Legendborn. I've been wanting to hear about that one.
Okay, so I don't know if you all know, but I am obsessed with Arthurian legend. Like, I love Arthurian legends in all of the formats, and have since I was like a first grader living in Germany and like visiting castles, right? Like I love them. So when I saw that there was an Arthurian legend retold in like contemporary America, I'm like, yes, I'm here for this book. And it's Legendborn. And like there's a secret society on UNC Hill, UNC Chapel Hill campus, and the main character is a high school teenager who gets like, she's at college as an early admission program. Her mother has died in like mysterious circumstances, but along the way she's discovering that she's got magic, and she's accepted into this Arthurian secret society despite everybody going, you're Black, King Arthur's Welsh, you don't belong here. And she's like, yeah, I do. And so she discovers like through the course of the book, there's like African magic and like European magic, and turns out, if you are a child of the slave trade, then you have lots of ancestry. And she like, it addresses slavery and all sorts of things, but it's also like there's monsters and demons and Arthur and all the Knights of the Round Table and Lancelot. It's just so wonderful.
Yay, you have raised that up on my list there.
Yeah. And also just the joy of watching you completely nerd out over this is made my day.
I read this book and I was like, I need the sequel right now. Too bad this book just came out. Oh, also there's a romance, and duh, because you can't talk about Arthurian legend without a romance. Like that's where we get our words.
I gotta
Is
say,
there for sure going to be a sequel?
Yes, there is for sure going to be a sequel.
Okay.
And the ending is...
does it cliffhang you?
It is a cliffhanger, yeah, for sure.
That's like, I gotta say, that's like the major downside of being a librarian, I think, is like we frequently read things when they're new, right? And so then you have the like, now I have to wait. Like I am always jealous of students who are like, here's the 5-book series and you get to read them all.
I tell students all the time, aren't you so lucky you get it all at once?
When I was working at the public library and Hunger Games came out and I finished it, I wrote to our materials manager who purchased books for our library and said, please get me the sequel as soon as possible. And she was just like, I will, but I'm number 1 on the list and you're number 2.
Why my family pre-orders those books and we just buy them and donate them to our school library. That way I can be first.
Nice.
Nice. Anybody else got something else to share?
Well, I just want to give a shout out to Arthurian Legend. I've been trying to get my students for the past 2 years who love Percy Jackson to read The Eighth Day by Dianne Slaerni, because it is like Percy Jackson, but with the King Arthur story. And the main character discovers that there's an 8th day of the week that only certain people born to a certain magical lineage, I think you know what I'm talking about, get to experience. And it's all linked to various punishments that certain characters received at the end of the King Arthur tale. And there's a lot of intrigue, less romance, but it is more middle grade focused, but it's fun, and it has some of those elements that I think people love Percy about. You know, it's like, what could be more complicated than going through adolescence? Well, let's throw in some magic and make it even really complicated, and some strange family connections. And I don't know, I just, when Miss Mescher was bringing up Arthurian Legend, I immediately was like, somebody please read The Eighth Day. It's really good.
Can I ask what everybody is reading right now? What's your current read?
Yes.
I just got The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.C. Schwab, and I haven't started it yet. I'm kind of doing that obnoxious thing where it's like, if I can get these million chores done that I need to get done this week, I will reward myself with a book, which is not a good policy. Just read. Everybody just read.
How about you, Miss McSheehy?
I have 2 books right now. Dear Justice, the sequel to Dear Martin, which I really, really liked. So I'm looking forward to, I haven't broken that one yet. I haven't started it. And then the other one I have is Punching the Air. And so I just finished, what did I do? Oh, what was it? Black Swan? Shoot, I can't remember it. Which is sort of, it's also written in free verse, like, Black Flamingo.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That was really good. I liked that. So, and then I also recently finished, I was listening to Concrete Rose, which is it's so good. The narration is so good. And so in Concrete Rose, I just loved it. How about you guys?
I'm super glad that you brought up audiobooks. That's not something that I personally have gotten into, although I feel like I should when I commute. But like in terms of diverse readers, right? Audiobooks is it's a different way to experience books, but like also totally legit. Anybody who thinks listening to an audiobook doesn't count as reading a book is wrong, in my opinion. Okay. So that's awesome that you listen to audiobooks as well. I am in the middle of Ordinary Hazards.
Oh my gosh, I just put that on Instagram. I finished it. It's so good.
It was also on the list of things that I'm needing to read for this book committee that I'm on. And I'm really enjoying it. It's a memoir in verse. And I know her, I remember reading Bronx Masquerade like years and years ago when I was first a librarian, and really loved that book. But I don't know that I've read much else of hers, but this is really good. I've weirdly read a couple of things that involve hockey. Like, you know how sometimes there are trends in
send those titles my way. I always need hockey books.
Really? And so, okay, so what I will say, one last book. I just finished reading a book I think it's called A Cold Day in the Sun. And it's a romance book that I don't know that it would necessarily speak to my students, but it totally spoke to me because it's set in Minnesota and it's like hockey country, and there's the the two main characters who are like having this romance are both into like 80s power ballads, which is like
Oh my gosh.
my teen years. So like it completely spoke to me as a like middle-aged white lady from Minnesota and transported me back to my youth. And it was really lovely. And if you like hockey, it's a girl who she was raised with brothers and she's played hockey with them her whole life, and she's really good, and she plays on the boys team in high school, which some people are really into and some people think is like not fair. So.
Now, when you were talking, I was like, I have check please right next to me. I have to grab it and show everybody.
I love that people out here also like hockey. I really associate that with my childhood in Minnesota. And so I sort of forget that like maybe there are folks who live in the West that also like hockey.
Yes. I am reading Stormbreak, which is book 3 in the Seafire trilogy. So Seafire is like apocalyptic pirates, but female pirates. But it's like super swashbuckling. Like that is the adjective for it. I'm reading book 3. And it's like Waterworld meets Pirates of the Caribbean, but female. I mean, I love it. It's so.
Who's the Johnny Depp Keith Richards character in this?
The main character. Her name is Calpurnia Tate. And
oh yeah, I read the first one.
Yeah, and so I'm reading Stormbreak, and it's just like, speaking of diverse readers, like people like it's nice to read something that's just fun and adventure-y, and Stormbreak is definitely that.
Something that brings you joy.
Something that brings you joy. And also it's like the female relationships in these books are so like they are friends. And also they're like the main character, the author is LGBT, and the characters reflect the diversity of that. It's so good. I know, I've heard great things. I
can't. We keep coming back to check please. Hockey, which, sorry, as someone from Baltimore, Maryland, and we didn't have a hockey team, I'm so curious to go to a hockey game. Is that right? Is it a hockey game? Am I showing my ignorance, or is it something like hockey match or hockey? But also, check please, a friend of mine turned me onto this. It was a web comic, and now it's a beautiful graphic novel, and it's an LGBT plus love story, and it's the sweetest book, because all his teammates not only support him, but they try to set him up on dates, and it's just the cutest thing ever. And okay, I'll stop. I free associate every time we're in these discussions.
Okay,
good thing.
What I do.
My other book that I'm reading is called Sky Hunter by Marie Lu. So it's the new Marie Lu dystopian series. A former student reached out on Instagram and said, "Hey, I haven't seen you talk about this book yet. You need to read this." And I was like,
"That's awesome.
I do need to read this. Let me get that." So I'm reading that also. And then because nonfiction is part of diverse readers.
Indeed.
I am also reading A Woman's Guide to the Wilderness. Yep.
Is it helping you with your hikes?
It is helping me with my hikes. Yep.
Is it helping you celebrate Women's History Month, which it also is? Yay.
Also, yes. Also, the middle grade version is A Teen's Guide to the Wilderness, or A Teen Girl's Guide to the Wilderness. Maybe something like that. It's the alternate. It's so like empowering throughout. Like I bought it for my children. But I think I need to get it for school because it's about hiking, but also here are empowering women, and here are like things that you can do to take care of yourself, and here's how hiking is different for a woman than it is for a man, and here's how you can take care of yourself and not pee on your pants.
Important tips.
That's a good one. Yes.
I think on that note, Ms. Mescher.
On that note, we have anything else to talk about for diverse readers?
Again, we could talk all day.
I was gonna say, I think we could talk all day, but
people may not want to listen all day. I don't know.
So thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day, guys.
Thanks.